Beautiful. It's there. Hello, hello. Wonderful.
Check. Can you hear me?
Hello, hello. There I am. Hello, hello. Talk to me. Trying. It's so hard to get it to go close. How about, how about now? Better? Yeah? Good, bad, 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 good, good, bad. Yep, still there. Okay. It's good to see you, my man. Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Oh, I'm still on. There's my microphone. Hello, hello. Am I muted now?
Oh no, you're definitely on.
I'm still on.
Talking again?
Hello, hello. Test, test. Hello, hello, hello. Test, test, test.
Yeah, you're in there.
You want me to fix this? I think it's hard to get it to. Yeah, yeah. Hello, hello. Test, test.
Yeah, I've got some levers I can pull.
Okay, great.
I think we'll be okay.
Should I mute it or do you want to mute it?
I'll keep it muted.
Okay.
Talk one more time.
Hello, hello. Test, test, test.
Just making sure you're in the live stream.
Great, thank you.
Lost time. Take a look at me now. Take a look at me now. As I recall, you were standing there, you was holding your rosary beads. Ooh. Everyone around here seems to think he knows what he means. Ooh. 7 ugly reasons kept me away from you then. Nothing is much weaker than the resolve of most men. I remember when we was alone in your room, staring out your window, we knew you'd be going soon. And I was so young, babe, I hope that you knew that I meant well. And when I looked in your eyes, I thought I knew you could tell. Now I'm blown back from the cemetery gates. You who I love dearly, now I must wait to be reunited in the sky when it opens. Well, my feet are so tired, baby, but my spirit ain't broken. Take a look at me now. Take a look at me now.
Now look at that road, look at that climb. When it's throwing in a nickel, look it out a dime. Too patterned, too close, too flat or too broke. Now look at you go. Took the morning to float, took the morning to find. I got a vision of a mission, but an awkward vibe. Too livid, too scared, too loving, too close. Now look at you, know. But when that cause is dead on arrival, and you coulda, shoulda, woulda for free. Now look at the postcard every minute. It's a very slow thing to have me.
In our pain, our blue, our beautiful, our hard, our messy, our ugly, our struggles and our joys. God is with us. God accompanying us. God alongside us. God amid us. God among us. God beside us. God by us. God including us. God near us. God plus us. God upon us. God as companion to us, God side by side us, God in the thick of us, in the thick of our humanity, in the middle of this weary world. God is with us. In the gift and in the muck and mire of real life, we are called to be present, to be in the flesh with one another, accompanying others, alongside others, amid others, beside others, by others, for others, including others, near others, a companion to others, side by side with others, in the thick of others. God with us with others. God with the world in the thick of the beautiful and the messy. In that, a weary world rejoices.
Hi, everyone. My name is Will Forsythe. I'm one of the staff members here at All Souls. Friends, it's good to be with you. And also with you. Yeah, thanks. I mean, whatever. Just joking. I find myself trying is the word, to be grateful for moisture today. But I'm very grateful to be with you all. And if this is your first time in these doors and in this space, welcome. And so thankful that you're here tonight in this space together as we are attempting to create space to just invite wholeness, all of us, all the emotions. This is a space to laugh, to be angry, to cry together, to feel numbness, kind of wherever we are. We want to invite kind of that fullness of who we are, to be present to ourselves, God, and one another. As All Souls, we are working to create a place of spiritual belonging and community together. So thank you for already participating and doing that together in this circle. Before we begin, tonight's going to be a little bit different than some of our other worship services, but in that same vein. So before we begin, I just want to talk a little bit of our community and why we're doing a lab tonight and what that means in the life of our community. So we're in the midst of a capital campaign. No, that's not right. We're in the midst of a sustaining campaign. What does it mean to sustain our community financially? And we have these different goals that we're working on as a community. And one of our goals is this one, that we would humbly engage our city by offering mutual learning experiences that transform lives and shape our practices together. So one of the key ways that we do this work of humbling, engaging mind, body, heart, and soul, and hopefully not just downloading more information, but actually moving it towards different practices in our lives. One of the ways we do this is what we have called our labs, where we try stuff on together. And we learn together, and then we take this into the world, figuring out how to practice it together. So we've had labs on anti-racism, labs on contemplative practices. We've had all different types, and tonight, as we were reflecting about what is it, it feels like we're already learning together as a community, and what do we want to grow at? One of the things we talked about is this idea of grief and sorrow. You're going to hear a lot about that tonight. And so this lab, Attending Sorrow, we hope that it meets you where you're at, and we hope that there's pieces of it that play into this experience. But we would love for it not to stay here, but to be something that we're offering conversation-wise into our city, our neighbors, our jobs, and our families, and into the things we practice and stumble in together. And so I say this because these goals are only possible because of the things that we're able to do as a community. And when you're giving to All Souls, when you're giving to this community, it allows us to do things like this and get amazing speakers to come and share their expertise and to share their lives with us as well. It allows us to have this space for ourselves and for our city. So thank you, first of all, for the way that you have crafted and curated with your body and with your finances this space. And as we move forward, these are things that we look and dream about. What can we talk about that feels honest and true as a community and in our city? So thank you for being here, and thank you for the ways in which you give to this community. If you want to know more about this campaign and what we're trying to do together as we sustain these practices, you can see that on our website or talk to me afterwards. I want to introduce a good friend and who's going to be curating our night tonight. That's what it's a cool word that the kids used to say. It's not cool anymore, but it's okay. But one of my best friends, and just excited for him to lead us in this space tonight. So please put your hands together for Adam Bellon.
Hi, friends. Thanks for being here. I'm going to ask our panelists to come on up and we'll grab a seat. As I just kind of explain a little bit of what we're going to do tonight. So we're not going to have a normal worship service. We're going to do a lab. Like Will said, it's called Attending Sorrow. And we're going to spend some time talking about grief, working with grief, articulating, expressing our grief, and then we're going to try to end with some hope, because we all need a little bit of hope these days. So I want to invite you to participate kind of however you're able tonight. I know some of us carry a lot right now, and this might be really helpful, and I hope that you can engage. You'll notice we've got some art supplies around. That's going to be part of this, and it is already part of this. So there's clipboards here. If you want to grab a clipboard right now, even when I'm talking, you can do that. Would love for you to grab a clipboard and these little white squares of paper and begin to, if it's helpful for you while we're processing and talking, to just let yourself process through some art. There's markers, there's scissors, there's glue, there's some words up here. We're going to have a time later on where we're going to spend a little bit more focused time creating art, processing what we're experiencing in these ways, like through the stuff on the table. So there's some tables in the front, there's some tables in the back. They have clipboards, they have scissors, markers, glue. So I'm going to say ready, go. I'm going to keep talking. Grab what you need. This is also not maybe a normal church service in that we're trying to have this be a little less of a formal feeling. So there's actually some meditation cushions up here. If you want to sit on the floor, you're welcome to do that. If you want to move around at any moment, you're welcome to do that. You can go up in the balcony. You can go in the back and move your body as you need to. Please listen to those intuitions that you have. They're an important part of what we're up to. And if you're watching online, also grab some stuff to create with so that you can do that while you listen and have that ready for our time in the middle. So we're going to spend some time paying attention. There's been a lot of grief in our community. We're coming up on the 2-year mark of when school shut down from COVID. We're coming up on the 1-year mark of the shooting at King Soopers. We're coming up on, 2-3 months after the Marshall Fire. A lot has happened in our community, but there's also a lot that's happened to us individually. And we're going to just give some space to that. We're going to hear about grief, process together. I also know that for some of us, we may have experienced some traumatic loss in our lives in the last couple of years. And while we want to support all of us in our grief as best we can, it may be that for you, if you've had a traumatic loss, that what we're able to kind of offer in terms of support tonight in this space is not going to be sufficient for you, and you might need more grounding to engage with some traumatic loss. Please don't feel like you need to go there on our behalf. If you need to take a walk, you're welcome to do that, and I just ask you to care for yourself well, but don't feel like you have to engage in ways that are not going to be good for you as a human. All right, I mentioned a little bit about our art. We're going to hear more about that in just a minute, but I want to introduce to you these folks behind me, and I'm going to actually sit down with them. This will be our panel for the evening, and I'm excited to hear from them. So I'm going to start at the far end. This is my new friend, Kathy Escobar. She is, among many things, a pastor at the Refuge Church in Broomfield. She's also an author. We actually went through her book just before Advent on various practices that we could undertake as a spiritual community. And you were here with us to preach during that, right? Yeah.
I think was it summer?
I don't know. Fall, maybe fall? Yeah.
Yeah, that was my first time here.
Yeah. So welcome back. Kathy is an all-around kind of wonderful, wise person, and so I'm grateful that she'll be included in this conversation. Next to her is Steve Gioielli. Many of you may know him. Steve's part of the All Souls community and is also a therapist who works mostly with adults. And so he's going to bring some of that insight and wisdom as well as just his own story. And then many of you also know Lauren Forsyth, who is also a therapist. Nice, Will. Who works mostly with youth and kids. And so she's going to bring some of that professional insight as well, again, as her work as a parent and just overall story. So we're going to hear from these folks. I want to ask Lauren actually also to talk to us a little bit more about why it is we have these art supplies and just how they can be helpful as we process and work with our grief.
Yeah, so, am I on? Yeah.
I think so.
I think grief, you have that feeling wheel that got passed out. Grief is a lot of the emotions. So there's this image that I like that is a kind of ball of tangled emotions of grief. And sometimes it's hard to put into words. It's hard to put all the different things that might be coming up into a regular conversation. So art can be a way to express the complex feelings. And I love art in therapy as more of a process than the product. So it's about exploring those feelings through words, maybe, and images, and lines and textures, and being able to create something that is in you and see it outside of you. And sometimes when you're finished, you're like, wow, that is really cool. I really love that. And sometimes when you're finished, it's like, wow, that really shows how I feel. And it might look messy. It might not be something that you would hold up and be like, wow, look at this amazing thing that I made. But it's still an amazing expression of what's going on in you. I have clients that want to create art, and then we rip it up together. Great. I have clients that make art and want to take it home and put it up on the fridge. Awesome. Sometimes we do art and need to sit with it and revisit it and let it be part of our story and processing. So I just invite you to, even if you haven't done art for a very long time, to play with it. See what it's like. See what, clipping different images and putting them together is like for you. Sometimes poetry can be the same way, so more like a free-form poetry of just kind of getting it all out on a page than worrying about rhyme or structure. So thinking of poetry in that same way as being able to hold the complex.
Thank you. Let's take a breath together. Lauren mentioned the handout that you all got. On one side is a feelings wheel. Throughout the evening, I encourage you to just check in with yourself. What are you feeling? And are there some words that you could highlight there, color in, or add your own? And on the other side is an image of a body. And I encourage you to think about what sensations are you feeling in your body? And maybe color in the spot or write what the sensation is on that spot. And then think about, is there some overlap? Is there some connection between what emotions you're experiencing and what sensations your body is feeling? Just to grow some awareness. What's going on in your body? What's going on in you? Maybe that doesn't reach your cognitive expression. And that's part of the attending. Wow, that was impressive. Got loud for a second. We're going to talk a little bit about grief. And in some of the work that I did preparing for this, I found a couple of things that stood out. One is that grief is universal. Everybody, throughout all of history, people have experienced grief. But the other one is that there's there's just like a silence about it. Like people just don't talk about grief, and those who are grieving have felt just the pain of that silence. I've found that for me, that silence has become like it's contributed to a really thin understanding of like what is grief, of it like a one sentence maybe definition. It's like what you feel when someone dies, and like that's it. And so I'm wondering if you all, kind of in any order that you want to, or however you would like to contribute, can help us think about and expand or thicken our understanding of grief. Whether that's types of grief or what we grieve or how grief looks, anything that you think might contribute to a thickening or a more nuanced vision of what grief is and even how it works. And anyone can start.
All right. Well, I was just grabbing the microphone to bring it up here, but I personally don't think about a definition very often. But as you were saying that, I think if I was just summarizing it off the top of my head, that grief is like all of the complex emotions surrounding literally any kind of loss. Any kind of loss. And that the losses are all different. And I can say from my own story that I had processed a lot of grief and loss related to my faith and the system that I had been in for a long time and then deconstructed and lost. And there were so many things, losing my beliefs. Then I lost the structures and the relationships and my identity and all the gut-wrenching work related to that. But I hadn't lost humans in the same way. Until my dad died in 2018, and then my youngest son died in 2019. He was just short of his 20th birthday. And that's when, like, no words do it.
Yeah.
It's beyond any bit of language. And so I think about that all the time because I've written a lot about grief. I've done Grief Week on my blog, all these things, and it's not that they weren't from a sincere place. But there's things that you can't give words to. And so I think another thing I just put is that complex emotions that often don't have any words, but show up in our bodies.
Yeah.
So that's my first thought.
Thank you. Yeah. What else?
Let's see. There's so many things. There's so many things. Kathy, I like what you said about like any kind of loss. Because I think our like picture of grief can get so small to just like a death or like something very finite. Again, in my life, I feel like most of the most significant losses have been non-finite. So something that like is ongoing or like living losses. That concept has been really helpful for me. In which like it's like metaphors I think are always helpful to get to some of the experiential part, but it's like kind of being on the ocean where like there's some, if you've ever spent any time on the ocean, like there's some days that are just like beautiful and flat and predictable and just these beautiful sets of waves rolling through, and then there's other days when it's choppy and it is, you can't tell which way the wind is blowing because it just feels like it's coming from everywhere. And so much of my process of grief has been learning to ride whatever that is and not fighting it. Yeah, I'll stop there for now.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, I think too of just I think I was learning about grief in my master's program, and there's these like the 5 stages of grief or the 7 stages of grief, and it seemed like very linear. Like first you do this, first it's kind of shock and denial, then you move and move, and the more I learn about grief and listen to people's stories of grief, and now there's more out just about how there are some common things that people experience and feel when they've lost someone they've loved, or some of the smaller, maybe not smaller, but different griefs that we experience. there's some things in common. And so sometimes having that roadmap of like, oh, that's normal. Okay, it's okay to be angry, can be helpful to normalize, like, okay, there's other emotions that fall into grief besides sadness. But it is more of a mix of all those things, or waves of a lot of the big emotions. And for a lot of people, grief lasts a really long time. And maybe there's different seasons that it feels more intense than others. But I think in our culture, a lot of times it's like, okay, it's been a week. You feel better? You know, so I think there's not space a lot of times to witness somebody's journey of grief, which really is lifelong, depending on what they're grieving and who they're grieving. But it might come up. It might not be as intense as when it, was in the first few months. Might not feel the same way, but it's changes and shifts, I think, over time. And the idea that someone would stop grieving or be over a death of someone they really loved is just sad and unfair, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren. I'm wondering what you have noticed in yourselves or in people that you work with or just see in the community about this, the last 2 years since COVID began, really, and maybe even before that. There's just been like, in the public eye, it seems like so much to grief, so much loss that we've all experienced in some way or another. And I'm wondering, are there things that you've noticed in this most recent season of societal grief that stand out to you, that maybe feel like it's important to note, whether that's in yourself or people that you've seen or society more broadly, maybe just connecting grief into our kind of moment in time?
I don't mean to just have it come back this way, but when Lauren was sharing, I think actually my experience with COVID is really similar to what you're saying. Is actually we all want to get over it. And so, and we've been surprised that we're not, because it's different than that. So it's probably a fairly good metaphor that we don't get what we want in this department when we're really honest. This world is filled with suffering. And we, most everybody here, not everybody, but most everybody, fairly white, resource, sort of suburban people, probably with a lot of education. We haven't had, as a culture, had to suffer the ways that some other cultures have. And we also, we just move on to the next thing. So COVID was not something we can move on to the next thing. Because if you think of every world crisis, like how fast we turn. I mean, we're feeling that even with the fires, it was a huge loss, that it's like a 5 to 10 year rebuilding plan. And we're actually only 3 months, two plus months in. And we all have kind of moved on to the next cycle as observers. If you're in it, you're not feeling that, but everyone else is. So I think it's a pretty good metaphor that we don't like suffering. I don't know what to do with it. I think we've gotten better tools, but we still want to resist it and not go with the wave of it. We want to push the wave.
Thanks, Kathy. What else?
I think I still feel personally a little disoriented that it's hard to know how it has affected all of us. And I know it's affecting teens for sure. Just the numbers for anxiety and depression and the need is so high. Just how many phone calls I get and my colleagues get. There's a lot of hurt. And when I'm sitting with a young person and asking them about their experience, they can name some things like, yeah, it was such a bummer when all my sporting, sports and things or theater or whatever got canceled and school was hard, and I think they could name some of it, but I feel like there's so many things that maybe we can't put words to, but it's obvious that it's weighing on all of us, and I feel like coming out, especially in our youth, showing up, but it's hard to know like why or what exactly was it. And just the loneliness and disconnect there for a while impacted some kids so much more than others. But I think sometimes it's hard when it's those things that are harder to name and they just start adding up to know, because it's like, well, things are getting better, as far as right now in the pandemic, and feeling a little bit lighter and hopeful, but something's still weighing on everybody. And I think some of it is for the kids I work with, just that reality of like life being hard and unpredictable and all the unknowns, and it just seems more like maybe anything could happen, so there's a lot of anxiety of what's next sometimes. And as adults, it's easy to just to enter in and be with them, but it's hard to know what is next. It's hard to be like, oh, it's going to be like this. And maybe before we could a little bit with more certainty, oh, it's going to be fine. This is only going to last 2 weeks and we'll be back at school. And then it's like, oh no. Okay, so now I can't have those certainties either. And maybe we're just all sitting in that.
It does seem like there's a generalized loss of the safety that comes with knowing what to expect, and just the overall foundation that we kind of have relied on for that. I want to kind of continuing on with that of having a hard time naming what are the things that we've lost, or when we think of grief, we don't necessarily think about, I didn't get to participate in this sports season, but that is real, and that is a loss. And so I wonder if we can talk about, I know Steve and I were talking at one point, and this idea of like, well, what are the things that we have lost? Sometimes it's a thing that's not there anymore. It's like a discrete loss, but you're talking about these living losses. I'm curious if you could say a little bit more about, some of the other types of loss. And the phrase disenfranchised grief came up in our conversation. I wonder if we could bring that in as a helpful piece.
Yeah, I think I agree, Lauren. Just like so much of, I think the word ambiguous loss is helpful. It's like we all know we've lost things, but if you really sit and try to take an inventory, some of it's really hard to name for a lot of people, unless it's very clear and finite, or it's a person or a home, of course. But yeah, to me it feels like very. Like there's these layers. It's like we're all going through the same thing, and yet each one of our experiences is so unique. So I think there could be this like assumption that we all are experiencing something shared, but if you actually talk about it, that's very rarely the case. So with that, you brought up this idea of disenfranchised grief. And that term basically just means like a lack of acknowledgement by society or people in your life. So it's a grief that goes unacknowledged, unwitnessed, and therefore kind of I think unvalidated for a lot of people, which can be like a pain and a suffering in its own way of like. Because you're affected by it, but yet it's like no one knows or can see, or maybe even you don't know or see that either. So yeah, I think for some people, I was thinking about this in preparation. It's like some of the most significant losses I think are like, for me, are like existential. Of like, I always thought I could go to a hospital and I would get what I needed, and now it's like, is the hospital going to have what I need? Is it going to be able to take me? Like a sense of safety has been utterly kind of shaken Another one has been like tradition, like celebrating meaningful holidays in ways that like I never thought I would. That has felt like maybe not devastating, but a kind of like uneasiness that like no one really knows that this is what I like to eat on my birthday, and it's like a tradition I've had for a decade, and like I can't do that because I can't be with the people that I want to be with who do that for me. Like that kind of thing, where it's like you have a litany of those, and they all add up, and it's like, whoa, yeah, maybe it's not like something large and tragic, but it's like a million paper cuts that don't really heal.
Yeah, as I listen to you talking, it feels like an unmooring almost. Like I had some things that kept me in the sphere, and those things are gone. And even the things that I used to rely on that helped me reconnect once I was unmoored are also not available. And so now I'm kind of floating, and I keep getting farther and farther afield from where I have been. And there's a sense of loss to that, and a sense of grief with that. Yeah. Okay, we have a little bit more of a painted picture of, I at least feel like my imagination of what grief is expanded a little bit and gotten some more nuance. I think we can continue to add to that. But I want to switch us a little bit from the noun of grief to the verb of grief. We've talked about the thing, but in my understanding, grief has been something that it kind of happens to you, but it doesn't just happen to you. Like if you just leave it up to itself, it's not gonna finish, or it's not gonna happen fully. It'll happen, but there's like a requirement of engaging in some way. And so I'm curious, like, how do you do that? And maybe even like, what happens if you don't do that? In terms of the how of grief. Does that make sense? That was several questions. So what do you do when you want to like, I'm gonna try to do this intentionally or engage in a meaningful way with the grief that I feel so that I am practicing my grief?
I mean, I think thinking of grief is less of something scary and, I don't know, somewhat of a visitor and paying attention to what it might have to say. And so it might have something different to say at different days, but making space to listen and be in tune. And sometimes it is beyond words. It's sometimes a feeling in your body of just feeling really heavy and tired. That's your grief today, you know, and giving yourself permission to feel heavy and tired and not have words. Making space to talk to somebody about it, a friend or somebody that's able to listen. If you have energy, and journaling, making art, but allowing it to take up space in your day. Sometimes, depending on what it is, sometimes we have to get through our day and do the things of going to the grocery store or going to school or going to work, and we can't, sometimes we do need to contain it and put it aside a little bit, but also allowing there to be space where can be curious about what it has to say. Not be afraid of it. But it's feels like it's going to consume you, I'm sure, some days, but that we have enough to, or maybe we don't, and that's okay too. Maybe we don't have enough that day, and that's where it is.
Yeah. Some of what I hear you saying is like bringing it to a level of conscious acknowledgement. It's not just I'm tired or what's going on, but like, oh, this is my grief coming out in this way. It's almost like a naming. Like, it doesn't have to be containing it, but just naming, oh, this is grief, and that's okay to just describe it that way. Does that feel like true to what you said?
Yes. Yeah, no, I think letting, like, normalizing that, oh gosh, yeah, whatever is happening. I think it is a little bit more clear when it is, a death of a loved one, and you can, but even then, like, Will's grandfather passed away this fall, and I talked to his mom on the phone, and it was pretty soon after he had passed, and he's in his 90s, and it was not unexpected, but just, she was like, oh, I don't feel anything. I feel so numb. I should be grieving.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to say to her, that's your grief today. Today you're numb.
Yeah.
And that's where you are. And maybe, other family members are feeling different things. So I think sometimes we start comparing, maybe I'm doing this wrong because somebody else is feeling it differently. But being able to say, like, yes, this is grief. And grief can be feeling numb. And whatever that is, I think allowing it to be and being able to tell that to each other. This is your grief today, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's a beautiful phrase. Thank you.
I feel like I'm getting so much out of the conversation, just personally, because for me, when Jared died, I have 4 other children. So I have 4 young adult children, and they told us something. My husband and I asked them, what are you most afraid of right now? Like, what is giving you the most trouble? And they said, we are afraid of losing you, not as in dying, but losing us emotionally.
Yeah.
And that really got to me in the right way, because I knew we would be able to do this as best we could. I mean, it's a horrible thing to do. But I knew that we needed to keep going for our kids. But I didn't want to just pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and go. And the truth is, you can't. I couldn't if I willed every bit I had in me, and there was just not the ability to do that. But what really helped us, and the kids did this too, is that I just kind of came up with this thought of just grief. You guys, grief has no rules. Grief has no rules.
Yeah.
So there are practical things that are the same. And there's rhythms and concepts and movements and all those things that are really true across every loss. That's another part. It is every loss. But everyone does it differently. And so, like, part of the how for us was how we were going to show up in our grief the way we needed to. And I have a hard time with that because I'm a people pleaser, and I wonder what people think. And I remember the very first time that I had a picture. This is going to make me cry, because I remember the first time of a picture of me after Jared died. And I was like, I never want a picture of me smiling ever again. Like, I can't have a picture of me. And so I remember when I let myself do that.
Yeah.
Because there's joy in my life still. There's joy in my family. My kids are all okay as you can be, but integrating grief. And related to faith stuff, because I really want to bring this up a little bit in the conversation, because I think that's an intangible one. It's tangible on if you lost your church, or you lost your job, or you lost your ministry identity or something. But like losing your bearing on God is really confusing. Yeah. And it's super disorienting. And I think on the grief has no rules part for me related to that, I didn't use that language when I was talking about my faith deconstruction and finding my way with other people. But it is like, you have to let ourselves feel all the feelings as best we can and somehow still live. Because if I gave into my full feelings all the time, I wouldn't be able to get off the floor and take care of my kids. But if I can give myself space to feel those feelings as much as I can, and practice it in community. So I think you need each other.
Yeah.
I do. Like, that's another, like, how. For me. If I didn't have my people, I don't know what I would do. But I remember being so mad at the church, like so mad. It's like rage at patriarchy and misogyny and just unhealthy. I can go, and I remember my friend saying to me, this is like just a few months after a really traumatic church experience. When are you going to quit being so mad? And I literally, I'm not going to say the words because there's children in the room, but the words I said to him, I was like, pass me in a year, and this is the first time I had let myself be mad. I'm a Christian good girl in my core because I learned that in my family, not the Christian part, but the good girl, and then add Christian, and you get a double whammy on not feeling anything negative, perceived negative. And so when I let myself feel that anger, and he backed off, and he's a dear friend, he's my partner in life, he's a wonderful, wonderful companion for ministry and life, and he apologized to me later, trust me. But he didn't know either, because he was like, people who are mad always get bitter. And I'm like, no, people who are mad, if you keep using your anger for good, you actually don't get bitter. Because you feel your feeling and let it come out instead of stuffing it down. So I think that's the how, but it looks so different for different people. So some people are more criers. That's not a sign of more grief. That's just a sign that that's how some people express themselves. And I think that's important too, because sometimes I feel bad. I cry, but I maybe don't cry sometimes what I feel like I'm supposed to. But that's like where I go, no, I don't have to do it a certain way. I have to be true to my own experience and be as integrated as I can, even though it's weird.
Yeah. Thank you.
No rules. I love that. I was going to say, like, I think grief, I don't think you can get it wrong either. Like, there's all these stages and models and stuff, and turns out that doesn't really map on very well to people's experience. But I think, like, back to your point, like, this is a natural process, right? Like, animals do this. Right? Like, so we can try to stop that or thwart that process or shut it down. That's probably where we get stuck the most. And in our, white Western lens, like, we don't have we got a lot of tools to shut that down. And so staying open, staying curious, I think is really helpful. But also, like, I think the feelings, the emotions, it's information, like, even to guide us. Like, I've worked with people who are like, something comes and they're just like, I need to go to this place. I need to, like, this is a place where I had a conversation with my, so-and-so who's no longer with me. Like, today I need to go there. I don't know why, I just feel it in my bones. And that's important, that's grief. Like, even that, it doesn't have to be just a flood of anger or sadness. It can be, it's think about it like this, like, something that you assumed about the world has changed. And now you're struggling, you're working through a process of adjusting to that. That's like, I'm a different person now. Like, even just how relationally we are and how much like our life is co-created with people and things. And like, when those things are broken, like, part of us is changed, is gone, is reformulated in some way. All that reworking of our identity, that's all grief too. But oftentimes we don't know where that's going. Like, back to the uncertainty part, right? Like, I think we'd like to think that, like, if COVID goes away, like, we're all going back to we're not going back anywhere. Like, we're all different now, whether we feel an imminent threat or not. Whether we know it or not, I think is part of that grieving process. Like, to the extent that we've kind of moved through that breaking of those assumptions about the world that we thought we lived in.
It strikes me that community then is really essential as we're relearning who am I in this new world that is not what I thought it would be. We need other people to work with us through that. and be present with us. You guys kind of softballed me here, which I really appreciate. This is the first Sunday of Lent, and oftentimes Lent is talked about as this like returning to our humanity. Like we've been trying to be more than human for so long, and then we have this time of year in the Christian calendar that helps us remember we are not more than human. And in a way, it's like a return to our wholeness that is like all of who we are, including our weakness, including our vulnerability, including our finitude. And I'm wondering, it seems that grief has a place in that wholeness, and maybe even a really important place, particularly in Western culture or in upper middle class white culture, kind of bolder culture, that grief might have a really important place in wholeness. And so I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about the role of grief in our wholeness. And Lauren, I'm going to maybe see if we can start with you, particularly with youth, as young people are developing their own sense of identity, kind of this space of in between childhood and adulthood. How does grief participate in the wholeness as it morphs and shifts? Maybe that's a really big question, just throw you on the spot.
What popped into my mind is there's just so much transition in childhood and in being a teen, and sometimes I think as adults we forget that those are a big deal. So, I mean, they already have so much going on just in life right now with, COVID and school and things that have happened in our community. But then on top of that, there's all the just very hard things of being a teenager and social media and all that makes it amplified and hard. But I had like an 8th grade girl this week that we were holding both the excitement of high school and picking classes and thinking about what that might be like, and the grief of like, oh my gosh, but so many of my friends that I've known since kindergarten are going different schools, and these teachers that have loved me and helped me express who I am and be more confident in who I am, I'm not going to be seeing them every day. And it seems like being able to attend to those small griefs where it is both, it's excitement and change and hard, and being able to be in that space with kids. I mean, I'm thinking about me as a parent and a counselor, but I think there's just lots of different layers of things that they're navigating, and I think it's easy to want to be like focus on the excitement of the like, but it's gonna be so great, there's gonna be so many amazing things about whatever is next, and not sit in the hard. And I think families that can hold both, and kids that are able to name both and feel both and be okay with feeling both, not have to be all one or all the other. I don't know, I see some ability to have more empathy for others when they can do that with themselves, and maturity, and growing in that. And I love that the kids were up here too. That made me feel at home. But I love when that age of middle school where they can be like little kid and want to play and want to throw darts. And I have a dartboard in my room. You're like, what? But like they want to be playful and young, and I love that. And I love when they're like have these really big aha moments of, whoa, like, what is life, and like, who am I in it? And these big questions that are coming up of identity and how they see the world. And I think modeling for them, being able to hold both is really important.
Yeah. Thank you. Other thoughts on grief as part of our wholeness?
Oh, it was so well said. I don't have a lot to add on that front. I agree so much with that the both and of so much of our experience. I think I was thinking wholeness in a different way of just like how grief is like a way of connecting, like with a larger,
Yeah.
like to be able to grieve for people that we don't know, like a bridge, like the way in which suffering brings connection and communion in that way. And if we deny ourselves that, then we break apart even what we all share in common.
Yeah.
But maybe not totally, but
Yeah. Thank you.
It makes me think that even with Lent, and I love the seasons. I think they're great because they help us focus. But I do sometimes wonder if it's a piece, like maybe it's knowing that we needed the focus because we weren't going to do certain things naturally.
Yeah.
So we needed to build it in, but there is a little piece of like the true wholeness spiritually and emotionally and physically and relationally. All that work is integrating it all,
Yeah.
all the paradox into one experience, and that's lifetime work to do. But I do think the more we can, the healthier we do. It makes me think of Francis Weller, who's done a lot of grief stuff, and says, you know, the trick is to hold grief in one hand and gratitude in the other, and be stretched large by that. And so whatever the grief is, and then, but not to force it. And so that's what we have. Like, whenever anyone says, get through grief, I just have my immediate hackles up. No matter what it is.
Yeah.
No matter what it is. Like, there really isn't getting through it. There's integrating it. And so learning how to integrate it into a natural part of the human experience. And we just are like super figure it out people. And that's how I always know I'm in trouble, is when I say, if I could just figure this out, in general.
Yeah.
But I do it all the time. And I'm trying to let go of that because it's actually a sure sign that I'm operating out of my brain.
Yeah.
And by what society says is what I should be able to figure it out. And I think grief things, no matter tangible, intangible, whatever degree of loss, they're like beyond the brain.
Yeah.
And so it's like they need that soul work that is like not figure outable, but how to learn how to absorb it. And I don't know if you guys have maybe seen this I've seen it here and there on social media. It's like, I hate the word resilience. Has anyone been hearing this? Like, I hate the word resilience, and I love the word resilience, but what they were seeing is, I don't want to be resilient. I just want to be weak for a while. Like, I don't want to have to stand back up. I don't want to have to, bend but not break. And that was really good just to think about that. I think it's a misperception on resilience, but I think that true wholeness is being able to navigate it all and to feel it all and to hold it all. And that's where I really don't think it's possible for a human to do without communal help. It's just too complicated. And I don't think God's enough either, personally. That's just my take, which some people might not agree with. But it's just not, at least for me, it's not enough.
Yeah.
Like, I just need all of it in order to make it.
Yeah. I really appreciate the getting out of our head and listening and working in our more full being. And again, a great transition. Kathy, I prepped Kathy earlier about this. I think this is a great transition for us to try to get out of our heads a little bit and make some stuff. And so I know some of you have been doodling or creating, or maybe you're just asleep. That's why you're looking down the whole time. That's okay. We're going to have about 10 or 15 minutes to create. And so There are no rules. There's canvases around the room. You can write or draw or whatever you want directly on the canvas if you want to. There are these white cards that you can create on, and you can glue them on the canvas, you can set them on the canvas, you can crumple it up and put it in your pocket, you can rip it up, you can do whatever you want. But this is a time maybe to listen to what's in you to get out. Again, there's no rules. You also don't need to just do one. You can let it out. I'll kind of gather us back in about 10 or 12 minutes and invite you to put what you want to put up on the canvases, and then we'll have a couple minutes to walk around and take a look at it as well before we wrap up. So on your marks, get set, go. And we can do that too. All right, go ahead and, if you're ready to put some things on a canvas or come up and write on a canvas, there's a couple in the back as well. Please do that. And also take a look. Grief at times needs a witness. And so we can witness and we can be witnessed in our grief. So we're going to take a couple more minutes to walk around, see, and just take it in. Go ahead and grab a seat. We'll have some more time after the service. You can walk around and witness. I just want to invite our panel back up here just for a couple closing thoughts before we wrap up our time. Thanks for doing that. I know sometimes that this kind of stuff is strange, and that's okay. But I encourage you to follow those intuitions you have about experiencing what you're feeling, letting yourself go there, and not getting stuck in your head, and working with your grief. So we have two topics to touch on just in the next few minutes. And the first one, I'd love just maybe some quick thoughts on actual strategies or things that you have found that have been helpful in grief, whether that's unnoticing, paying attention to something specifically, or a practice that could be helpful. There are in the worship or in the guide, there are some strategies in there that can be helpful. There's also some resources on the back that Steve put together for us. So check those out, and there's some practices you can do. But my question just is simple. What strategy or tool or wisdom of the many that you have would you share with us as we wrap up today?
This will be short. Get outside. For me, it saved me. Nature saved me. So just anything outside and look up and notice and breathe in and see symbols and just get outside.
Yeah, thank you.
Go to an All Souls lab. Just kidding. I said go to an All Souls lab.
That's it? That's all you have to do? Yeah. Find a way to process. Everybody processes differently, but actively kind of engage. Talk to somebody who's a good listener. Write, journal. For some people, it's harder to be in touch with your emotions, like spending time doing that, being mindful. Like all that, I think can be helpful. So bottle it all up, hold it all inside. Is that what you said? Yeah. Opposite of, got it. Yeah. Thank you.
One of my losses was kind of one that wouldn't be typically noticed as a loss, but when I had a preemie and had a really scary experience and close to death experience, there weren't that many humans that could tolerate my story, but the ones that could just felt like a balm, and I needed to tell it over and over and over and over again. And I did have a counselor that told me that this is grief, actually. Grief of your expectations, of how you had experienced the world before. And she said, and in here, I want you to tell it over and over and over again and kind of wring some of the pain out of it. And sometimes our loved ones can't handle it because it's too close.
Yeah.
Or we've told the people already, and then it's hard to want to tell them again because it's like they already know. But having those people or a counselor that will let you tell it over and over again. I think sometimes when I have kids I'm working with that have experienced grief, lost a parent or lost their home in the fire, it's kind of like, I don't know if I'm gonna have the right thing to say, I don't want to say a cliche that's hurtful or anything like that, but I think just creating space to tell their story again and again and tell me about what happened or tell me about their loved one again and again and the different stories of that human, if it's a death, but like tell me the awesome stories, tell me the hard stories, and being able to sit long enough in it, because I think I need people that can tolerate the complex with me, and I need to be able to do that for people that I'm, either professionally caring for or my friends and family that I'm trying to love well. But I think the more practice I have holding the complex story of somebody else, the more permission I can give for my story to be held, too. So I think we're giving ourselves permission and each other permission when we can do that.
Thank you. I think, Kathy, you said earlier grief and gratitude, and I feel like hope is another word that's kind of that. It's not exactly the polar opposite, but like it fits somewhere, and it doesn't require that the grief goes away. And so I want to end with just a conversation or some comments about hope. With so much grief, with so much sorrow in our own personal lives, in our community here locally, in our country, in our world, What's the role of hope?
I can start. I think there's a lot of unhelpful ideas. I mean, you brought up some about, like, obviously people's ideas about how long you should grieve, and our culture loves, like, our dominant culture loves a conqueror. Like, so it's okay to grieve as long as you're, like, resilient and you pop up on the other side of it somehow.
Yeah.
But a lot of people's stories are not that. So even, like, the idea of complex grief, I don't know if that's been mentioned yet, but going back to, like, the shattering of, like, the good life that we thought we had going, and like, the hope for that is gone, but people in their journey can often find a life of meaning and purpose, even if it's not what they wanted. I think there's something of, like, holding the shattering of what you thought you had, or what you longed for, or what you pictured, with also, like, something that can come out of the ashes that might also be a life worth living. So I think that is a part of grief in itself, is, like, finding that. And for some people there's, their losses are so great, they live in, like, a state of chronic sorrow. Yeah. And even the idea of hope can be pretty offensive, because their pain is so big, and their life is reduced to, being a caregiver for a partner who had is now very disabled or something like that, and their life is that takes up all the space. So I think for everyone, there's a different relationship to hope.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think what people value and what is sacred comes into play a lot. So obviously the hope that we have in our faith, not in, like, a flippant kind of way that we can just offer that to feel better, but like a deep enduring, like, God's not going to save you from a life that's difficult and painful and challenging, but maybe there's something in that that's rich and meaningful too.
Thank you.
Makes me think how hope is, it's a hard, I love the word hope. So, like, there's a joke at the refuge all these years, like, hope on rocks. We write hope on rocks. Kathy, that's like our Wi-Fi signal. I have this huge thing on my mantle that I got, when Donald Trump got elected. It was really hard for me. And that day of inauguration, I got this huge, like, sign that says hope on my mantle. And it's really helped me. But it is interesting what you're saying, that I see now how hard that word is. And, but I still like it. I do still like it, but something has shifted a teeny bit. And related to faith shift stuff, I kind of used to talk about cynicism, skepticism, and hopeful realism. And that's probably, like, healthy in that, because you can get stuck in cynicism or skepticism, but there's something about hopeful realism. And there was an article, I don't know if any of you saw it in The Atlantic, about toxic positivity. Did anyone see this?
Yeah.
Wasn't that good?
Yeah.
And because it talked about tragic optimism. And that's a little bit more, I really resonate with that. Accepting that COVID did do something to us. So COVID on top of everything did something to us. And tragic optimism is hopeful, because it's a more honest look at the world. And that, whatever that was for me, is probably the place to live. And it's shifted a lot of my identity, because I had a lot of identity, not in like a flippant, toxic positivity, because I've worked in hard places my whole life. But there was something that I didn't get in the deeper place about how hard it is to be human. And that a more realistic view of that would be helpful. And it would help everyone, myself, and it would help people around me as well.
Yeah.
And to think for my kids, I don't want them to suffer. It's a horrible thing to have them have to do what they've done. And I'd never say I'm glad for that, ever. But I have seen when young people have to do something hard, that it's a little more realistic.
Yeah.
And we didn't really have that in my family, to be honest. We didn't have anything hard. And then we got like one of the worst ones. But it's taught us a tragic optimism, and maybe a hopeful realism, and a more welcome to the human race. And this is what it's like, and it can be so good, and it can be so hard at the same time.
Yeah.
And that gives me hope, being able to hold those together.
Thank you. Friends, that's the end of our time. So I wonder if you'd join me in saying thank you to our panelists for sharing their wisdom and insight. Thank you so much. And to end, like All Souls does at the end of all of our services now, I wonder if we could make as much of a circle as we can. So much of, maybe a little surprising part of this, go ahead, is that so much came out and needing other people. And one of the beautiful things I think of this practice is that we get to look across a circle into the face of another person who is also experiencing their own humanity, who is experiencing joy and sorrow and hope and grief and all that is beautiful and all that is hard. So I'm going to say just a prayer to end us, and then I want to read us a blessing as we go. So pray with me. God, thank you that you meet us in the reality of being a human. That we get to be fully ourselves. That we get to feel what we feel without apology. And that it all belongs. Meet us as we go today into the complex lives that we have that are both sorrowful and joyful, that are filled with a complex hope that doesn't discount the grief, but welcomes it and integrates it. In Christ's name, amen. This is a blessing from Jan Richardson called Rough Translations. Hope nonetheless. Hope despite. Hope regardless. Hope still. Hope where we had ceased to hope. Hope amid what threatens hope. Hope with those who feed our hope. Hope beyond what we had hoped. Hope that draws us past our limits. Hope that defies expectations. Hope that questions what we have known. Hope that makes a way where there is none. Hope that takes us past our fear. Hope that calls us into life. Hope that holds us beyond death. Hope that blesses those to come. In the name of God the Father, God the Son, and God the Spirit, one God and Mother to us all. Amen and amen. Friends, go in peace. Thanks for being here tonight.
was gonna give you all of my time, more time, more time. I was gonna go and get you more time, more time, more time. I was gonna give you more and more time. I was gonna give you loads and more time. My time, it's my time. I'm not gonna get you out of my more time, more time. I'm gonna get you out of my mind. More time, more time. I was gonna give you a story more time. I ain't lying, I ain't lying. I was
in the jaws of death. We reach for saving hands. No help will come from man. The Lord is coming. With the Red Sea closing in, there's no safety in their mighty horses. Can you feel the driving wind? Behold,